Welcome to Buy Black, the only podcast dedicated to helping you find, connect with, and support Black-owned businesses. We're on a mission to bring consumers and business owners together to ignite the global Black economy. I'm your host, Gerald Jones, and if you're a Black business owner or a socially conscious consumer, you've joined the right community. Ready? Let's get to work. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me on another information-packed episode of Buy Black. Today, we're going to follow up on a key topic that Nika and I discussed briefly during episode 3, getting verified as a veteran-owned small business and the advantages that creates for your company if you're looking to get into government contracting. Now, we'll get into that in a moment, but first, I wanted to take a minute to vent a little bit of frustration and hopefully connect with one or two of you listening to this episode. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of seeing our people dead last in economic achievement. I'm tired of watching unemployment rates go down for every demographic but ours. And I'm tired of hearing people say what they can't do or what somebody else won't let them do. We, Black people, seem to be collectively living in the 20th century economy while we are surrounded by 21st century technology. We have got to get with the program. After the crash of 2008, there was a massive shift in the balance of our workforce. Millions of people who lost their jobs or had their hours cut decided to just stop playing the game. Instead of searching and waiting and begging for companies to hire them, they turned to the internet to create their own businesses. They took advantage of existing platforms like Amazon and eBay, Etsy, Uber, and Udemy to establish their own companies, or they just created their own platforms like blogs, podcasts, and online stores. The major statistical exception is us, and there's no excuse for it. It is cheaper and easier to start a business today than it has ever been in our lifetimes. In most cases, you can get set up and start bringing in revenue for only a few $100s. For example, I started doing something a few months ago called retail arbitrage. If you never heard of that, it's a really simple business model. You basically just go to the store, you find the clearance rack or you find the items on the aisles that are on clearance. You check those items against an app on your phone that tells you what they're selling for on Amazon or on eBay. And then if you can make a profit, you buy the items. And then you post them online, you sell them, and you get the profit in between. Now, when I got set up doing this, it cost me $39.99 to get a professional seller account on Amazon. I already had an eBay account. And then I spent about $250 on buying my first batch of products. In less than 2 weeks, I had turned a profit, and now I'm 3 months into this business, and it's bringing me anywhere between $1,500 to $3,000 of positive income every single month. Now that is not a bad side hustle, especially for the amount of work that I have to put into it. And there are so many more examples of businesses that you can start from home with very little money, much like that one. We just need to get out of this 20th century mentality and join the 21st century economy. If you want to share your experience with retail arbitrage or recommend any other business models with low barriers to entry, I want to hear about them. Drop a line in the comments for this episode, or if you have questions about how I manage my business, email me at gjones@buyblackpodcast.com. Now that I've gotten all that stuff off my chest, let's get to the original focus of the show. How you can put your business in position to win government contracts by taking advantage of small business set-asides. Now, full disclosure, the best benefits of these programs are for veterans, but what I'm about to cover may apply to you regardless of your veteran status, your gender, or even your race. So stick with me. To get us started, I'm going to cover some key terms and definitions that you must be familiar with. Don't worry about taking notes. I've included links to all the information we're about to cover in the description for this episode. So let's roll. The first thing I want to bring in is this idea about a set-aside. When you look at the federal government's contracting process, typically contracts are bid on by different companies, and the government is going to judge those bids or those proposals based on the value that the government thinks it can get and which company it thinks is going to do the best job and deliver the most value for the price. The problem with this is that there are a lot of really large, really well-established companies who already know this process, who know how to win government contracts. And it makes it really difficult for small guys like you and me to come in with our business and compete. So the government has created this program of setting aside certain contracts so that only small businesses can bid on them, or small businesses have the first shot to bid on them before any other large businesses can come in. And even within that, the government has different qualifications of small business who are going to have advantage when these set aside contracts come to market. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is what all those different categories of small business are, what they mean, how your company might fall into one of those categories, and how you can take advantage of the government's programs to help you and your business be able to compete with the big established companies that are already out there in the market. So here's our first key term: a veteran-owned small business, or VOSB. It's exactly what it sounds like. A small business that has been verified, owned by a person with veteran status from the U.S. military. Now, the next one is going to be a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. So between the two of those, which one do you think is going to have preference in a set-aside? It's absolutely going to be the service-disabled veteran-owned small business. Okay, so the next term that you want to know about is something called a hub zone, a historically underutilized business zone. This is a really cool concept. Basically, the government has set aside physical locations in the country that it has deemed as underutilized. Now, typically, this is going to fall into small businesses that are in low-income urban communities, low-income rural communities, and also on Native American lands. All of those different places can be and often are designated as hub zones. So if your business is physically located within one of those hub zones and it meets some other eligibility requirements, you may be able to qualify for preferential treatment in some of these government contract set-asides. So here are some of the eligibility requirements for a hub zone company. First, it must be a small business according to the Small Business Administration standards. Now, you can find those standards by looking at a table of the small business side standards and matching that up with the industry that your company competes in. And you can find a link to that table in the description for this episode. Second, it must be owned and controlled at least 51% by U.S. citizens or a community development corporation, an agricultural cooperative, or a Native American tribe. Its principal office must be located within a hub zone, which includes lands considered, and I'm quoting here, so don't hate me, Indian country, and military facilities closed by the Base Realignment and Closure Act. Now, the last thing is that at least 35% of its employees must also reside in a hub zone. So if you have a business that meets those eligibility requirements, then you can qualify to get verified for the hub zone program. To find out if your business is located in a hub zone, just go to the link in the episode description called Hub Zone Map, and you'll be able to put in your address and find out whether you're currently in a hub zone or where you might be able to relocate your business so that it's in a hub zone. So the next terminology that you need to be familiar with is called the 8A Business Development Program. Okay, so 8 and then in parentheses a lowercase a, Business Development Program. This is a business assistance program for small, disadvantaged businesses. It offers a broad scope of assistance to firms that are owned and controlled at least 51% by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. It's a 9-year program and it's broken down into 2 separate phases. The first is a 4-year developmental stage, and then the second is a 5-year transition stage as your business grows, becomes successful, and can survive on its own in the marketplace. Now, here are the eligibility requirements to gain access to the 8A program. First, must be 51% owned by American citizens by birth or naturalization. Second, it must be a majority owned and controlled by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. And you know the government, they've got definitions for that as well. So the first thing, social disadvantage eligibility. That's going to fall under Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, Asian Pacific Americans, and subcontinent Asian Americans. Now, when I read subcontinent Asian Americans, I read typically they're talking about Indian, like from the Indian subcontinent. I could be wrong about that. That's the first piece as far as being recognized as a social disadvantage eligibility. Secondly, you also have to meet the criteria of economic disadvantage eligibility. So here, the very first thing is you must already have been found by the Small Business Administration to be socially disadvantaged. So if you're not falling under one of the socially disadvantaged groups, then economic disadvantage doesn't matter. But if you do fall under one of those groups, now the next piece is the economics. Your assets cannot exceed $4 million for the business. Your personal income cannot exceed $250,000. Now this is done on a 3-year average. And then your adjusted net worth must be less than $250,000. So if you meet both the criteria of a socially disadvantaged individual and an economically disadvantaged individual, your business could qualify for the 8A Business Development Program. Some other standards: it must be a small business according to the SBA standards, which we talked about earlier. Your business must demonstrate a potential for success. The principals in the business must show good character. And then there are other separate requirements for Native Americans, Native Alaskans, Native Hawaiians, or certified development companies. So if you meet all of those eligibilities, then you could qualify to get your business into the 8A Business Development Program. Now, obviously, when you're talking about a 9-year program with the government, there's going to be a lot of hoops to jump through to get into that. However, if you can get into a program where the government is basically mentoring your business into success over a decade, I can't see any downside to that. So it's definitely worth checking out. So the last things we're going to talk about are woman-owned small businesses, WOSBs, and economically disadvantaged woman-owned small businesses, or EDWOSB. So again, if you look at the requirements to qualify under these categories for government contracting, first, must meet small business size standards for your primary industry code. At least 51% of the company must be unconditionally and directly owned by women who are U.S. citizens. A woman must manage the day-to-day operations of the firm. A woman must make all the long-term decisions for the firm. A woman must hold the highest officer position in the company, whether that is as the CEO or as the president. And this woman who does hold that CEO or president position must work at the business full-time during normal work hours. Now, a big reason for all these rules, specifically about who must be in charge and how involved that person must be, is because when these programs were first put together, a lot of times men would basically put a business in their wife's name and qualify for the government programs, even though the woman had nothing to do with the business. And so they were basically skating around these affirmative action rules. And so they placed more stringent requirements on what qualifies as a woman-owned business or an economically disadvantaged woman-owned business. And the final thing here is there is no minimum amount of time that the business has to be operational before it can be qualified as a WOSB or EDWOSB. Now, after women-owned small businesses, the government places a precedence on all other small businesses. And then after that, what they call full and open competitions, or unrestricted, where any business can qualify. So if you look at that list of key terms that I just gave you, basically the way that set-asides work is that when a contract goes out, and it is set aside for small businesses, when businesses go and drop their proposals and they compete, the government is going to give first precedence to service-disabled, veteran-owned small businesses, and then second preference is going to go to veteran-owned small businesses. And then after that, in no particular order, it's going to be the hub zone businesses, the 8A businesses, and the woman-owned businesses all competing with each other. So if you're a veteran and you have a small business, or you're thinking about starting a small business, it would be very valuable for you to go through the process to get verified as a veteran-owned small business or a service-disabled veteran-owned small business in order for you to qualify for a lot of these smaller contracts, because you will get first shot regardless of who else is competing for those contracts. Now, to qualify for this program, which is called the Vets First Contracting Program, eligible SDVOSBs and VOSBs must first be verified through this 5-stage process. So the place that actually does the verification is called the Center for Verification and Evaluation. And that process starts with pre-qualification, which is optional but highly recommended, followed by intake, a pre-application review, an assessment, and a decision. Now, the reason they really recommend doing the pre-qualification is because if you go through this process and you get denied, you have to wait 6 months before you can go back through the process to try to get verified. Now, 6 months when it comes to the life of contracting or winning contracts, that can be a lifetime. If your business is sitting there for 6 months and you're waiting for the opportunity to try to get back into the industry to win these contracts, you could very easily go out of business if you don't have some other form of revenue coming in. So it's highly recommended that you don't skip out on any of these pieces. You don't try to cut any quarters when it comes to getting verified by the government, whether that's as a veteran-owned business, a woman-owned business, a hub-zone business, or getting into the 8A program. All of them, it would just make sense. Cross your T's, dot your I's, make sure that you're providing every piece of paperwork that you need so that you can go through the process. It can be clean, it can be swift, and then you can get verified and start competing and bringing revenue in for your business. That's it for today. Quick, down and dirty episode. If you have any experience with or questions about taking advantage of small business set-asides, be sure to post them in the comments. Or if you have any specific questions for me on this process, email me at gjones@buyblackpodcast.com. As always, if you found this show useful or you think it would be worthwhile for others to listen, I'd really appreciate it if you take a few seconds to leave a 5-star rating or review on iTunes. It really does help. Remember, the next show begins our 4-part series on starting a business, so be sure to tune in and tell all your friends. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Thank you for being part of the Buy Black podcast community. If you've enjoyed today's show, find us in iTunes or Stitcher to leave a 5-star rating and review. Join us next time for another empowering episode. If you're a Black business owner anywhere in the world, I want to help you connect with more of your target customers. To get your business in our online directory and find out if you qualify to be featured on the show, send us an email at connect@buyblackpodcast.com, or you can reach me, Gerald Jones, directly at gjones@buyblackpodcast.com. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.